finding jobs. There are a handful of ways to do this, including keeping up with journalism groups and organizations on social media. The most obvious is to check a station's website. The easiest way to do that is to Google their call letters, add a plus sign, and then type careers. Adding the keyword careers is important because some news sites have a job board for the general public in the area for jobs available in the area. Everything from office work to trade jobs. That's not what you want. You want to know about the opportunities at that particular station. Internships too can also be found this way because stations sometimes include them in the career page with the station's jobs. So always be checking, no matter how large the market. That's how I found my job at NBC5. You'll also want to make sure to check large markets because they now require less experience than they used to. A top 20 market used to be someone's third or fourth job in the business, and at that, you had to have 3 to 5 years in what's called a medium-sized market for the news director to even consider you. A medium-sized market is typically top 50 on the Nielsen DMA, though it can be top 60 if you have good live shots and good packages. Those higher standards were pretty much set in stone when my mentors were climbing the ladder. So that meant that it might take you 8 to 10 years to break into a top 20 market, definitely a top 10 market. As I was growing up in the business, I myself watched the requirements for both medium and large markets change. Medium markets only required you to have at least one job beforehand, which meant at least 2 years in the business. That's it. Sure, some required 3, but that was okay for me because when I was really looking, I had 3.5. That was huge because it was easier to get in than it used to be. Now, you still have to have an impressive tape, but that's something that you can control. Keep in mind, the lower requirements also mean the job will be more competitive because more people will be qualified. I noticed the job at NBC5 only required that you had to have only one other job. But again, you still had to have an impressive tape. It has to show that you're working on storytelling, have characters in your stories, and hustling to be the first on scene for both spot news and breaking news. And of course, there are people working on those skills in lower markets, people just like you. So yes, I say all this to say it's competitive, but you can get ahead. What you're learning here will give you a serious advantage. The rest is just timing, which is the professional way of saying that the rest is luck. Another resource are what are called job files or job listings, usually gathered by journalism organizations. RTDNA has had them, probably still does. When I was in Illinois, the statewide journalism organization, the Illinois News Broadcasters Association, had one. Again, all the National Association of Organizations will have them as well. Plus, nowadays, they probably post these links in real time on social media or their website. I used to have to check out stations' individual websites or go to these organizations' websites or wait for a weekly email where all of the jobs in the last 90 days were posted. And I know, this probably sounds clunky, but back then, it was a gift because before the internet, it was just word of mouth. So I felt lucky that I could at least check online or just wait a week or two for an email. And here's a tip for you. If you're a one-person band looking to continue to do that, you'll have to do more than just Google reporter or photographer. Because for us specifically, there are at least a dozen different names for what we do. One-person band, one-man band, multimedia journalist, multi-platform journalist, multi-skill journalist, video journalist, VJ. The list goes on because each ownership group gives a different name to the role. For example, while most of the one-person bands at NBC5 were called video journalists, my official title on the books, on the payroll, was content producer. So, you're going to want to search for all of these names and then the new ones that haven't been invented yet. So keep your ear out for what you're hearing news managers and managing editors say. You may pick up on a term that Tegna uses, but Meredith doesn't, or that Meredith uses, but Sinclair doesn't. Or maybe there is some new name for what it is that we do that's now starting to come into vogue. Nowadays, you have to apply online and get into their corporate system no matter what job you apply for. What I would always do too is reach out to the news director directly with all the same material, my cover letter, resume, and of course, link to my reel. Do this, even if the website says to apply through human resources or the online portal. Yes, first of course do that. Do what they say. Apply through human resources or apply through the online portal. That way they know that you know how to follow instructions. Then, email the news director separately, because the news director is the person whose eye you have to catch. They are the ultimate decision maker. They're what's called the hiring manager, and you're what's called their direct report. While HR does have to process you, onboard you if you are hired, and of course explain your benefits, the person actually hiring you is the news director. They're the one checking the box, saying, okay, that's the person we want. And therefore, that's the person you have to impress. So please keep in mind that most places you apply to obviously won't ever get back to you. You've probably already have some experience in this. Sometimes you'll get a generic letter in the mail like this one saying that they've received your application, reviewed it, and went with somebody else. But that's actually pretty rare. What you see here is just a collection of ones sent to me, and these by no means are representative of the hundreds of tapes I've sent out. Though I did used to collect these just for the fun of it, because if they took the time to send them, I wanted to be able to show people that, job applications are pretty much a gamble. Nowadays, of course, I would imagine this is done by email. The point here is that months will go by before you realize that you didn't get the job. So now let's talk about timing. I send out tapes about once a year at ABC News Channel 20 just to see who would get back to me. Here's what I would recommend for you. Start looking 9 months out from the end of your 2-year contract. What I mean here is start looking, but don't necessarily apply. You can apply, but if you're offered the job before your current contract runs out, and some stations will fight you on leaving, especially if it happens to be right before or during a sweeps period, so that means November, February, May, and July, some stations aren't going to let you leave yet. Some stations will in fact try to sue you to stay. They will try to enforce the contract. It certainly doesn't happen all the time, but I've heard enough stories from a variety of companies that you need to be warned. There are only 2 ways to be let out of a contract early. 1, your news director likes you and just lets you leave. That would be beautiful. It rarely happens, especially if you're staying in the business. Sometimes you can have more success with that if you were leaving the business and going into something else, meaning a new industry, PR, marketing, or communication somewhere. But again, too, they can still fight you on that. Here's the tip that you need to know. You need what are called outs in your contract. Outs are basically a paragraph in your actual contract that says that if you get a job at a station, for example, in a top 50 market or a top whatever market, you define the market size, then you can leave without penalty. Usually, and there'll be a line with this in there, usually outs kick in the last 6 months of your contract. Sometimes, if you're lucky, they kick in right after you've had your first anniversary with the station, meaning you're starting the 2nd year of your 2-year contract. But that's rare. Bet on your outs kicking in with only 6 months left. And at restrictive stations, maybe only 3 months left. That's because they're hiring you for a 2-year contract and they're putting you on the air. You are one of the many faces of the station. And therefore, you're being marketed. So they want to guarantee that you'll be there for at least a year, and again, in most cases, at least 1.5 years. I talk about outs at length and how they work in the advanced section. So the point here is to start applying 6 months to 3 months out of your contract. I always felt that 3 months was cutting it a little close, but I've definitely seen it work out for plenty of reporters. The part I was always uncomfortable with on their behalf was that they didn't even start searching or thinking about their next job until 3 months out, meaning 90 days out. I always felt more comfortable being proactive about my next job, always searching regardless of if I actually followed through and applied. Again, I like thinking about it well in advance. I'm of the belief that as invested as you are in your current job, in telling good stories and making a difference, that you should always be thinking about your next move. Because that's why you go to journalism conferences. It's why you network. It's why you've invested in a course like this. It's to stand out, to have the edge, to be in the best position possible to get your next great job. And in the next video, we'll go into detail about how to apply for a job. I'll see you there.